Hi everyone. So basically this last couple of weeks have been really weird. Last week I attended the 50th anniversary celebrations of paediatric kidney transplants, which was amazing. And I was also lucky enough to attend a seminar in Newcastle about kidney transplantation as well, where I saw some familiar faces. And then here I am today, but today I'm speaking, and I'm really honoured to be speaking here today. And again, I can see some familiar faces, so hello again. I'd like to thank Jelena for inviting me to speak here today, and I'm really honoured to be in the midst of so many great minds. So thank you for having me, and I hope you enjoy my story. So it was at my mother's 21-week scan that we found that I had a heart defect, known as atrioventricular septal defect. I was born relatively healthily, having surgery at the Evelina at 6 months old, and then again at 2, where I had my first bypass, or a Glen shunt. But apart from that, I lived really well and had really healthy, mostly well childhood. It was when I got to 7 that my health sort of started to deteriorate. As my heart grew weaker, my team at the Evelina London Children's Hospital started to discuss surgery. Eventually, at the age of 10, in April 2010, I went in for biventricular repair. It was a huge day for everyone. A doctor was flown in from the USA to carry out the surgery that had never been done on a child my age before. My family and I walked into that hospital that day, nervous and apprehensive as you can expect. We would never have imagined what was to come. Although the repair went well, my vulnerable heart simply could not cope with the changes that had been made to it, and the consequences were devastating. I was put on ECMO, and they were unable to take me off the ventilator. I quickly entered end-stage heart failure. It was touch or go whether I would survive, and my family friends said their goodbyes to me several times. After 4 months in the Evelina, clinging to my life, they decided that my last hope was a heart transplant. So, a few days after my 11th birthday, I was transferred up to the Freeman in Newcastle to wait for a chance of survival. I waited for 4 weeks on the transplant list, and a heart came just in the nick of time. The transplant took 12 hours, and I arrested twice, once in theatre and again a day later. My chest was left open, and I was put back on ECMO while we waited to see whether my heart would settle. They closed my sternum gradually over a number of weeks. A first-of-its-kind bootlace-like closure that would gradually get tightened when syringes were turned. They named it the Sissy closure, and they now use it on other children in the hospital. My recovery took a long, hard, and unpredictable 3 months, and after being transferred back to Evelina, I was finally allowed home in December, just in time for Christmas. However, as a result of being ill for so long, my body suffered a lot of damage, including my kidneys. By the time I was well enough to go home, I was on hemodialysis 3 times a week. For 1.5 years, we waited to see if my kidneys would recover, but it was clear that they wouldn't. Dialysis was limiting my life. I was missing school frequently after already having a year off. I was struggling to keep up with my friends, and I was a frustrated adolescent who was ready to get on with my life. So we decided that a kidney transplant was the next chapter. Me on dialysis looking miserable. On the day of the opening ceremony of the 2012 Olympics, I was given my second gift of life, and it was the most straightforward surgery I've ever had. Luckily, my mum's kidney was a perfect match and started working immediately. I was celebrating my 13th birthday 2 weeks later in M&M World. Unfortunately, it wasn't the end of the road for me. During my first very long stay at hospital, my knees had suffered severe contractures and I developed neuropathy in my feet. I completely lost my ability to walk and was confined to a wheelchair. In 2013, I had major surgery on my feet, known as triple arthrodesis. After years of intense physiotherapy and being told by more than one doctor that I would never walk again, I took my first steps, and here I am standing before you today. Here's a picture of the first time I stood up after my surgery. It still was not the end of the road for me. In 2014, we went on a holiday to Turkey, and it was our first family holiday since I'd been ill in 2010. Within the first few days, I began to feel unwell, but put it down to dehydration or a bug. By the fourth day, 4 days after my 14th birthday, however, I was so ill that I was unable to keep any fluid down and was unable to leave my bed. I was also suffering from the worst headache I'd ever experienced. I was taken to the hospital, and after many tests and finally a CT scan, I was diagnosed with a brain tumour. Our world came crashing down again. I was rushed back to the Evelina by air ambulance, where they later discovered I had a brain tumour, another brain tumour, and 2 tumours in my spine. I was diagnosed with EBV-driven PTLD tumours. The EBV virus had been passed down to me through my mother's kidney, and due to my immunosuppressed immune system, had manifested itself as tumours instead of glandular fever. Typical, really, for me. I had brain surgery to remove one of the tumours, and then underwent months of treatment, including at the Evelina and cytotoxic T-cell treatment and radiotherapy at the Royal Marsden. I lost all of my hair and missed almost another year of school. Thankfully, though, my tumours settled, some even shrunk, and I was finally able to continue my life as normally as I could. In 2014, I received a Teenager of Courage Pride of Britain Award. Since then, I have been steadily recovering and getting back to a normal life. It hasn't always been easy, and there have been a few bumps in the road. I had to have a coronary stent and then an ablation earlier this year, but I'm glad to say that now I'm really happy and healthy. I was able to complete my A-levels at the same time as all of my friends, and last September set off up north to become a student at Newcastle University. My first year and a half studying journalism have gone really well. I'm able to socialise, study, have fun, and live my life to the full, the way I've always wanted to, and I'm loving being a normal 19-year-old girl. And I write a blog now. Oh, that's me at my first day at uni. I write a blog now documenting my life and journey as a transplant patient and student. I never would have made it if it hadn't been for the amazing team of doctors all over the country and world who worked to save my life, and I'm so grateful to every single one of them. The immense and undying support I have received from my family and friends has kept me going throughout my journey. Simply put, I would be dead if I hadn't been able to receive the 2 successful organ transplants, and I am forever in debt to my donors. If we could please take a moment to think of my donor who donated their heart to me. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Any questions are welcome.